Ahimsa is the highest duty. Even if we cannot practice it in full, we must try to understand its spirit and refrain as far as humanly possible from violence. Gandhi, Mahatma, Volume 7.
Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. That was a basic formula in the Sanskrit scriptures, in particular the Mahabharata, that non-violence is the underlying law of reality. What that means, and here's where Gandhi becomes very helpful for us ordinary erring mortals, what that means is that the ideal is to be treated as a distant goal toward which we try to proceed as much as possible, but never feel that, oh, I didn't make it. The point is to make our greatest possible progress, not to achieve at complete ahimsa, which doesn't seem to be quite possible for an embodied being in this world.
It can feel particularly inspiring to me to aim toward these impossibly high goals, like sagehood or mastery, enlightenment, perfection. Never, of course, being attached to the idea that we will ever achieve that, because, of course, that's not quite a human thing to be able to achieve perfection, and mastery itself is a dream. But if we can have the right direction, then we can constantly course correct. Because, of course, there's this simple idea that if we're off when we're aiming towards something in a distance, if we're off by half a percentage to the right, then we end up, of course, a great distance away from the goal. But if we're constantly with each step course correcting because we have a clear goal that we move toward, then as we move forward, we course correct and we course correct, continually becoming better versions of ourselves, continually becoming better cultivators and practitioners of our art, even when our art is loving compassion, even when our art is becoming better activists and change makers in the world. If we can move forward always having an idea that we want to become free of violence, even if that is very difficult or impossible for humans, if we can become perfectly loving and perfectly compassionate, even if that's actually impossible, we move toward that a bit at a time, never holding ourselves to the ideal in the sense that we feel bad about ourselves for falling short, but rather we feel inspired to move toward this perfect ideal, this something very worthwhile to cultivate.
Every moment of our life should be filled with mental or physical activity, but that activity should be sattvika, tending to truth. Gandhi from Uravda Mandir.
There was a very useful scientific formula in ancient India that divided, well, just about everything into sattva, rajas, and tamas. Tamas means inertia, rajas means activity, but not necessarily well-directed, and sattva means balance or law. The image used in the Bhagavad Gita is a lamp burning in a windless place. So at every moment we can use this formula, with not making ourselves unduly self-conscious, we can ask, is this the sattvic way to proceed? If it is, we're doing the best we can.
That again is this important principle here, the following the valuable, the sattvic way, the way of wisdom and truth. And by recognizing that our principle is to move in the direction of nonviolence and healing in the world, we have methods of using stillness and compassion, and then we have very specific techniques that we develop as activists and transformers in the world. But what we can do is to continually move in the direction of that goodness and truth, that kindness, that lightness of being, that sense of contentment and satisfaction, moving away from suffering, moving toward freedom and becoming our best and highest selves. If we can fill every inch of our lives, every moment of our living experience with this expression of the Tao, this healing and internal return to something better, then as we move forward in life, we become expressions of healing and compassion and kindness in the world, and we become actual forms of medicine for our community and our families.
My presence acted as a check upon petty bickerings. Gandhi, Satyagraha in South Africa.
This passage in Satyagraha in South Africa does show so well how a person who is deeply grounded in the inner peace influences all those around him or her. In fact, everyone influences all those around him or her, but it becomes noticeable and very beneficial when you have a person like that, whose mere presence helps to dampen conflict. There's a lot of work beyond that also often must be done, but it's really good for us to know that you have what's called non-local consciousness in science, how we influence one another.
And again, I feel very inspired by Master Nagler and Master Gandhi here, and simply by being your best self. It's as though you emanate a field of healing and compassion and peace around you, even if it's just to the extent that people look around and they see you acting mature and kind and wise, and they look down and recognize that they are being a bit silly themselves, perhaps, as they bicker and act childish and selfish, that they are able to reflect upon themselves differently. And for instance, at the monastery, it's very fascinating to notice that when things are dirty, if things are being cluttered and dishes have been left out and people aren't cleaning up after themselves, perhaps after a long series of work days or something, then it becomes easier for people to continue making a mess. People leave things around even more. People wipe their shoes and wash their hands even less because it's dirty there. But when the space is kept clean and neat, maybe we have somebody there who enjoys cleaning, and what you notice is that people then go into that clean space and take off their shoes and wash their hands and pick up after themselves because it's clear what the expectation is, and it makes their poor behavior that much more obvious. And if you can become that kind of light, if you can become that kind of tuning device for the harmony in the room, that kind of example of right living and kindness and wisdom, then it brings out the wisdom of the people, the inherent kindness and wisdom of the people around us. And in the very least, as Gandhi experiences here, at least a check upon their worst behavior.
Worship or prayer is not to be performed with the lips but with the heart. Gandhi, The Mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
Well, this is a fairly obvious observation, but one that we would do well to have in mind from time to time, because often when we're doing some kind of spiritual practice, we can get distracted and drift away. And it's good for us to remind ourselves that we must be focused on what we are doing for it to really help.
And I would add that this wholehearted quality that we cultivate in everything that we do, whether it's worship or activism, is if I'm healing in the clinic, I notice a tremendous difference, a genuinely profound difference in the effectiveness of my work when I'm there and I'm present with the person wholeheartedly and genuinely listening and feeling and working with them through this transformation, versus if I'm tired, maybe I am only halfway paying attention, I am distracted by something, and even if I do the exact same action, not only does the person, of course, notice that distraction and feel less valued by me, but I feel worse, and the treatment itself does not work as well. So there's a kind of magic in everything that we do. We can bring our whole heart, the full quality of our attention, the full amount of our qi, we might say, from this Chinese medicine and Taoist perspective, to the present moment, to the person, to the action that we're engaging in. And if that's trying to make a difference in helping the world become better, then what better reason to become fully present? What better reason to cultivate ourselves so that we have the capacity and the internal strength to be there when we need to be there to help make our world a better place?
Satyagraha is an unmistakable mute prayer of an agonized soul. Gandhi, February 24th, 1946.
I find this very, very helpful to bear in mind and think of when we're involved in an action, because often we think that satyagraha is the screaming of an angry soul. And Gandhi is telling us that that kind of, quote, satyagraha, unquote, will not really have the desired effect. And it's very important that we realize that we're not doing it correctly, because otherwise we say, oh, we tried satyagraha and it didn't work. But remember, the inner dimension of satyagraha is, if anything, more important than the outer action.
And that's very inspiring to me as well, that to recognize that the path that we're following here, this path of healing and peace and bringing wisdom and making our world a safer space for our friends and family, this satyagraha pathway is one that begins within. That is a road that starts inside us and then out into the rest of the world. And we recognize that the reason that we're doing that is because we ourselves have experienced suffering. We ourselves have experienced loss and pain, and we realize how terrible it is, and we don't want that for anybody else, whether the people close to us or the people far away that we'll never meet. We know how awful it is to experience that, and we realize that's enough. We don't need this in our world. There's a better way. This is this mute prayer of an agonized soul. We want to express that quality, something that we learned from our own lives and from our own suffering, and we want to prevent anyone else from having that kind of agony in their own life. And it begins inside by developing peace and understanding, this calm contentment and acceptance, this nurturing of our capacity to be fearless and creative, to be our best selves. And then we take that out into the world and we help to make it safe so that not another person, we say to ourselves, no more people suffering. And of course, we will fail. But one person at a time, we can make the world a better place, and we can keep somebody safe. And hopefully make the world just that much closer to becoming the world that we actually want.
Love is the strongest force the world possesses, yet it is the humblest imaginable. Gandhi, Nonviolence and Social Change.
Another good reminder that when we are practicing satyagraha in the correct spirit, there are universal forces that help to magnify our efforts and guide them to a successful conclusion, but they have to be done in the right spirit. We can go through all the right moves and make our petitions and so forth, but to the extent, and this is a matter of extent, not black and white, to the extent that we're harboring resentment, we will be compromising the benefit of what we're doing, limiting the effectiveness, and vice versa.
And recognizing that it's not just that we are injuring ourselves by harboring resentment. Because remember that this healing has to start inside us. And if we curb that healing, if we get in our own way by stopping ourselves from feeling contentment and compassion, then we are actually halting that process of healing within ourselves, which means that we are unable to express it out in the rest of the world. And so first we have to recognize that we are not capable of forcing change, but we are capable of being part of the change. We can't make the world different, but what we can do is heal ourselves and then help others heal in the same way. We have no individual power to create this, but we have all of the power to express something genuinely transformative in the world. It's not a thing that we can do. Our instructor would say it's a thing that you can don't. It's a non-doing. It's a becoming empty. It's becoming a vessel for something greater than we are. That deep sense of expansive love, which is a thing that comes through you, like a light shining through you and into the world. And the best thing that we can do is to humble ourselves, to make ourselves empty and free, to express something far greater than we could ever be alone.
Not to yield your soul to the conqueror means that you will refuse to do that which your conscience forbids you to do. Gandhi, August 18th, 1940.
This is identifying the strong aspect of satyagraha, the negative aspect that you see wrong behavior happening, which he calls the tyrant, and you just have to refuse to go along with it, no matter what it costs you. And these days it can cost you a lot. But it's very effective in awakening the conscience of even the evildoer, so to speak.
Because even this so-called evildoer has the same resonance as we do. We've all been that evildoer at some point. We're all people that have this capacity for great beauty and great and terrible passions inside us. And so, in this case, the conqueror can be something inside you, the conqueror that comes through and says, I need this thing, I want this thing, I'm going to express this great anger. And if we do not yield our soul to those forces of hatred, the forces of greed, and instead become our best selves, become free of those things, then that means we can avoid situations, in this case that he talks about, that our conscience is forbidding us to do, these terrible actions, whether it is lashing out in anger at somebody that we love, or taking something that doesn't belong to us, or uttering an untruth, hurting people in general, spreading actions in a world that we know will make the world a worse place. And instead, if we can rise above those temptations, rise above those movements inside us that tend to cause us to become the people that we know make the world a worse place, if we can become strong enough to avoid those qualities, that means that we make space for something better. And in the very least, we can stop doing harm to the people that we care about, and we can start to express those better qualities, those angels of our better nature.
Ahimsa is one of the world's great principles, which no power on earth can wipe out. Gandhi, from the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
It was long recognized that ancient peoples see law and mathematical exactitude in the forces that play out in the world, and they see that on the level of what we would otherwise just call emotion and dismiss. But this is one of the most important examples of that just as love moves the world, when it moves us, we can be very effective change makers.
This is that recognition that the deep science of the universe, the deep and foundational forces of what it means to be a human, is expressed in what we experience as love, or stillness and presence. These qualities of great and open-hearted spiritual experiences that every tradition talks about. And if we can tie ourselves to that movement, to those forces and those qualities, if we can begin to express those with every moment of our lives, with every word that we utter, with every breath and every step we move forward, and we develop kindness and sincerity, clarity, generosity of spirit, open-hearted, friendly love, then this is something that is unstoppable. And because it's a part of human nature, it is not something that can be wiped out, no matter how many tyrants appear, no matter how many terrible things are uttered, no matter how many bad things happen. The second somebody becomes healed and whole, once again, these qualities arise. And that lens that channels this light of the universe can be polished, can be focused. And that becomes this science of nonviolence that we are exploring. Thanks to Master Gandhi.
Independence of my conception means nothing less than the realization of the kingdom of God within you and on this earth. Gandhi from the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
Of course, independence was the rallying cry for the Indian freedom struggle. No one worked harder to bring that about in the outside world. He was always at pains to remind us that true independence comes from within and then gets expressed in the outside world. And what does that independence mean? Not so much independence from others, but independence from our own negative impulses. That's where the real power came from.
Yeah, the first place to find freedom is inside. And when we talk about becoming independent, we become independent of those forces that I was mentioning, tear us apart inside, and then cause us to act terribly on the outside, cause us to destroy our communities, to seek out the worst possible expressions of humanity. And if we can become free of those, become independent, the Buddhists would say you become free of greed, of hatred, of illusion, of delusion. You become clear-seeing. You become open-hearted. You become settled within yourself. And this is when we have the opportunity to bring the world that we want about, that we are hoping to see in our lifetimes, this heaven on earth, this kingdom of God. First, you find it within you, and then you express that in the space around you. And it's as though you've brought that kingdom of God to the earth.
Thus, the lynching ultimately proved to be a blessing for me, that is, for the cause. It enhanced the prestige of the Indian community in South Africa, made my work easier, and the experience prepared me for the practice of satyagraha. Gandhi, My Early Life, 1869 to 1914.
First of all, let's clear this up. Obviously, he does not mean the kind of lynching that we have unfortunately been witnessed in our country in the past centuries, where you actually, kill a human being. He must be referring here to some kind of concerted attack against him for something that he said or wrote. And that is to see it as a lynching was not too great of an exaggeration. It's the same impulse carried out in drastic practice that leads to those destructive acts. But the important point really that he's making here is that when you are involved in a right cause or with the right means, even apparent setbacks can help drive you forward. That's really encouraging and inspiring for us to be aware of.
so many people that I've talked to in the clinic over the years have talked about how the worst experiences of their lives, whether it was a tremendous car accident or being shot at in a war or trapped in a hurricane. I can think of so many examples that people have told me about when they're coming for healing in the clinic. They talk about these moments where their bodies were broken, their mind was smashed, their emotions were repressed, and how that over enough of a period of time becomes the best thing that ever happened to them. It becomes the fire within which they use to cultivate something greater. I've heard that so many times in the clinic that it almost becomes an expected response when people start to talk about the things that were going on for them in their lives at that time. And at the same time, we need to allow for that process to happen. If we hang on to the grievances of those bad experiences, if we start to identify ourselves with the injury, if, for instance, I have an old injury from when I was younger, and it's become so common for me to talk about that injury, maybe something small like an injured knee, perhaps. And I become the person who has an injured knee. I talk about it all the time. It becomes the reason why I can't do the things that I want to do anymore. It becomes the reason why I don't have friends because I have an injured knee. It becomes why I'm embittered about my life because my knee was injured and it stopped me from doing the things that I wanted to do. And that becomes a major obstruction in our lives because we identify with the injury. And this can happen with emotional injury, with terrible trauma, with light trauma, with things that happened when we were children. And when we identify ourselves with those qualities of being hurt, of being stuck, it becomes very difficult to become free of them. And if we can instead learn how to identify ourselves with something grander, that is with vastness, with pure love, with light, with these qualities that each tradition explores and uses different language for, deep stillness, emptiness in the Buddhist tradition. However we choose to think about it, once we start to see ourselves with that quality, then the injuries simply become an expression of life, even something to be treasured, something to be appreciated and healed. And so if we can do as Gandhi talked about here, a terrible thing happening to him, I'm not certain about the incident he's describing, because this is such an early point in his life. But if we can recognize that these are the things that shape us and that propel us forward, that give us an experience of great suffering so that we can understand it in others, we become better healers if we have had our own suffering. And if we have those chances, if we use those as the fires to cultivate in, then they become wonderful healing moments in our lives and things that we can look back on and talk about as one of the greatest blessings in our lives.
Fortunately for humanity, nonviolence pervades human life and is observed by men without special effort. If we had not borne with one another, mankind would have been destroyed long ago. Ahimsa would thus appear to be the law of life, but we are thus far not entitled to any credit for observing it. Gandhi, Ashram Observances in Action.
Really some important science here. Gandhi is saying that there is a universal principle operating in, quote, nature, and the role of the human being is to identify it and participate in it, not to just drift. If we drift, we get knocked about by that good force sometimes, and its opposite other times. So what we have to do is wake ourselves up, be aware that we're not inventing something brand new, but we're participating in nature, and then with our conscious mind, deliberately participate in it. It's a wonderful model.
And to recognize that we are choosing how we want to live, that we choose to do the difficult thing. And to recognize that, as he says here, nonviolence pervades human life. We have constantly been around it for most of our lives. We're usually not in a state of constant violence. We're usually not always in some state of stormy turbulence. Things are not always attempting to destroy us, hopefully. Probably right at this moment, something relaxing is happening. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this video. And so if we can recognize that the main law of life is this peace and settled quality, only occasionally broken up with moments of trauma, then we can start to identify life more as one of peace and healing, and we pay attention to that quality, rather than, as so many historians and teachers do, is they start to identify more with the qualities of suffering and great turbulence, the wars that happen. Even though between the wars there were huge periods of 99.9% peace, people just trying to live their lives, family trying to raise their kids, neighbors helping neighbors. This ahimsa, this quality, is the law of life. This is something we want to learn to pay attention to and then nurture that quality, rather than assuming that everything is bad and pessimistic all the time. That's just a mental habit. We can pay attention to the way things actually are and then nurture that quality. Let life grow. Let it heal on its own. Life heals. It's part of what it does. We heal. We open. We nurture. Compassion is an aspect of our nature which expresses itself naturally when we simply open our hearts and connect with somebody else. This is part of our healing. This is part of our light. We don't have to try. It's what happens naturally as part of who and what we are as humans.
Man is a social being. Without interrelation with society, he cannot realize his oneness with the universe or suppress his egotism. Gandhi, Young India, March 21st, 1929.
This profound principle, this ineluctable principle, has been discovered over and over again by mystics and social workers and so forth. We look at ourselves as bodies and therefore think that we're separate, but that is only to look at the very lowest form, lowest level, so to speak, of our reality. And by constantly focusing on it, we simply drive ourselves into frustration and error. So the more we can elevate our consciousness, the more we become aware of our interrelatedness, the more successful will be our life, individually and socially.
And if we can allow this quality to fill our lives, this lightness, this love, this humaneness, then as we interact with other people, whether we're very quiet people like I am, I tend to be very introverted. I like to stay at home and I work with the people in my immediate vicinity at the monastery. And other than that, I like to meditate and be still and hang out with my wife. And Melanie is very similar. And yet, my world is still filled with people. I live in a community. And so without community, humans really cannot function very well. And by recognizing that what we're doing is we're learning to create a community that is healthy, that is whole, that is able to function without violence, arrogance, egotism, then what we can do is express the best parts of our nature. And that supports other people with expressing their best nature, which again supports me. And together we work toward creating a space within which humans, can we use the word ascend, transcend, transform, and become the creatures that maybe we can say that we're always meant to be. Or we can return to how we were always meant to be, before we were injured, separated, segregated, damaged, and set down to become creatures of greed and fear and ignorance and hate. This is not our true nature. The world is not like this. We can simply return the world to how its possibility is constantly waiting for us to be.
Not to believe in the possibility of permanent peace is to disbelieve in the godliness of human nature. Gandhi from Truth is God.
Well, that's very simple and profoundly true, that if we recognize that when you get down to the very deepest level, we are good, loving beings trying to be in unity with one another as far as we possibly can, as St. Augustine said. When we recognize that, then even the distant dream of world peace becomes a possibility. And because it is a possibility, it is an obligation. We absolutely must work for it and never say that it's unachievable, as many try to say.
I'm in agreement that healing ourselves and our community is actually a responsibility. It is part of a spiritual path to recognize that I am, as a whole person, as I become whole and balanced, it is my nature to want to then express that wholeness, that quality of love and compassion within the space around me. You can't keep it to yourself. You always must shine your light out. That's part of how this works, which makes your path a natural one. As you cultivate that ability to express this love and care that you feel inside you, even at this moment, and you bring that out into the world, that becomes a way of expressing your spirit, your nature, these deeper qualities and possibilities for human life. If we can recognize that this can be its own spiritual path, its own healing path, not just an activist path, but something deeper and more profound, where you can find meaning to express and direct your entire life, as Gandhi talks about it here, as the godliness of human nature, the deepest and best, the bestest parts of what we are. Bring that out into the world. Help other people find it. And then those people share it with the rest of the world. This becomes a wave of light and love around the world. This becomes a ripple of smiles and well-being. And that's the kind of world that I'd like to live in.
The greatest tragedy is a hopeless unwillingness of the villagers to better their lot. Gandhi, January 9th, 1937.
To put this in perspective, it's good to realize that basically the whole of India was characterized by village life. There were something like 700,000 villages in that subcontinent. And one of the great acts of domination, of exploitation, that happened not only in India, has been shown to have happened in ancient Palestine, so on and so forth, is the domination of the countryside by the city, of the village by the metropolis. And that infuriated Gandhi because it was stifling the best of which human beings were capable. We cannot relate as an individual to the whole. We need intermediary circles, as he was just pointing out. So life in the village gives us an ideal context for realizing our unity with all of humanity and all of life.
And it's such a gift to be able to see all of these various aspects of our nature in the space around us. As I was saying before, that we can work with kids and we see ourselves in the kids. We work with adults, we see ourselves there. We see the better parts of ourselves. We see the parts of ourselves we wish weren't there. We see mirrors of ourselves everywhere. And as we grow to recognize that inside we are the same, then we can appreciate the diversity in the outside, the uniqueness of every expression. Because we say, oh gosh, I feel that way, but look how you're dealing with it. Look at the art that you're creating. Look at the family that you're nurturing. Look at this great skill you've developed. How cool. And if we can look at people that way, and then recognize that as a community, we can bring all of those together based on our sameness, but reveling in our diversity, and then allowing every person to take up a space, to work for themselves, to become more dignified, more free. I feel like this is a fantastic pathway and a way forward for our species to become its best self.
I will not go underground. I will not go into shelter. I will come out in the open and let the pilot see I have not a trace of ill will against him. The longing in our hearts that he will not come to harm would reach up to him and his eyes would be opened. If those thousands who were done to death in Hiroshima, if they had died with that prayerful action, their sacrifices would not have gone in vain. Gandhi from Parallel, Mahatma Gandhi, The Last Phase, Volume 2.
One cannot but think of the song. I think it may have been Bob Dylan who said, "Let me die in my footsteps before I go under the ground." It also illustrates the incredible faith that Gandhi had in what I called a little while ago non-local consciousness, that if you have love in your heart, it's part of a universal matrix of forces and registers in other human beings, even if they're at a great distance. And incidentally, recently, modern science has been proving that this is possible. But let's not over-scientize this, and let us recognize the incredible love and the incredible courage which Gandhi is here illustrating even in the most dire of circumstances.
One of the wonderful examples that Michael will tell from time to time is of a scientific experiment with this non-local consciousness that he's talking about. How people become harmonized, how we begin to work together on the inside, on the outside. The study, I think, was in Stanford in California, and they had some people meditating together, and this was recreated a number of times. They took people who would meditate together in a room, and they would sit until they felt harmonized. They felt quiet inside and as though they were sharing the same space with this person. Just a simple meditation, kind of developing a sense of harmony and companionship. And then they would take one person into a room with lights, and they would take another person across the campus into a room and put them into what is called a Faraday cage. It's a cage that blocks out electromagnetic signals and these kinds of things, just to sort of isolate this person in this other separate room far away. And they would monitor the brainwave activity of both. And first, they had noticed that people's brainwaves become synchronized, harmonized, when they are meditating together. And this is a well-known example, and this is something that happens with a number of things that humans do when they're in a room together. They tend to synchronize heartbeats and breath patterns. It's very interesting. And in this example, they allowed the person who was in the first room to have lights flashing off and on so that their brainwave patterns would respond to these flashing lights. Very simple way of demonstrating ways to change brainwave patterns. But fascinatingly, that person who was far away on the other side of campus inside that Faraday cage, their brainwave also started flashing as though they were in the room with the lights, showing that somehow these people had synchronized, harmonized themselves, even across a distance, in ways that are difficult to explain, non-local in nature, and very worthy of consideration. That we are not as separate as we imagine. And even if you just take into account how much humans harmonize just sitting in a room together, just playing a game or chanting together, meditating together, being together in a loving way, how we all impact each other emotionally, energetically. We could say that chi flow patterns change, your mind change, your posture shifts. We're not separate from each other. And recognizing that you have the power then, by healing yourself, by becoming an example worthy of mirroring from other people, then you become a kind of medicine. You go into a room and other people begin to heal as they match up with you. And if you can imagine that as a possibility, that can itself be a wonderful motivation and a reason to train.
Just as preservation of one's own culture does not mean contempt for that of others, but requires assimilation of the best that there may be in all of the other cultures, even so should be the case with religion. Gandhi, Young India, December 6, 1928.
Yeah, we've referred to this earlier as the principle of unity in diversity, and the magic of it being that the unity, real heart unity, to use Gandhi's expression, comes from the kind of diversity where each individual and each culture, in this case, each religion, fulfills itself. So that is the wonder of it, really, that if I fulfill myself, if I fulfill the ideology to which I'm dedicated, I don't interfere with others. I actually complement their fulfillment. That makes peace possible throughout the entire world.
To recognize that no human can have all of the truth. None of us see the entire picture because we are ourselves, just ourselves. We're just here looking around at what we're looking at, seeing the world from our perspective. There's the very famous old metaphor of a bunch of blind people walking around, and they come together for some reason, and they walk up to an elephant and they touch the elephant. None of them can see the elephant. None of them know what it is. One person touching the trunk describes a rope or a snake. One person touching one of the legs describes a tree trunk, maybe the side of a building. When they touch the side, the abdominal wall, another person touches the end of the tail and describes a rope. And it's just this funny example of there's one truth there, but we can only know the piece of it that we can know. And since humans are blind in a lot of ways, we can only experience some tiny slice of the universe, slice of the overall spectrum of pie that is our existence. Then we can recognize that other people may have a piece of wisdom that we do not have. How wonderful to recognize that, gosh, I can't do this on my own. I still want to improve. That means I need you and your help in order to improve. So speaking of which, if you don't mind putting some thoughts and ideas down into the comment section of how I can improve, what you have learned that in your life has helped you improve the most, maybe something that Michael here or Gandhi mentioned in these last collection of videos, the last 21 videos that I've made, which helped you learn more about peace and nonviolence. This is the idea that collectively we are more than we are alone. We want to wake up on our own. We want to be free on our own inside, content and settled. We don't need the world. But to grow as people, we definitely need each other. And so to recognize that other people are experiencing the world differently and therefore need separate tools and wisdom traditions than we do in order to heal and survive, that means that we all have different forms of medicine available to us. And if religions and healing traditions are all designed for different kinds of people, that is a wonderful thing, not a problem.
The heart's earnest and pure desire is always fulfilled. Gandhi, from the story of my experiments with truth.
Yeah, if only we could believe this, it would give us a great deal of courage to tackle the forces that are so distorted and so arrayed against us in our world today, but to recognize that to the extent that we have what Gandhi calls purity in our heart, which means absence of ill will, which can mean actual concern for the well-being of the other, however obstructive and apparently negative other may be, that force will tell. It will have its effect. We may not be able to see it, especially because we're not trained to see it. But it cannot be wasted. It cannot go in vain. Just keeping that one thing in mind should give us tremendous encouragement and inspiration for the incredible work that we now have to do in this world. So if I may paraphrase Gandhi, it is with a wrench that we take leave of you, dear listener, and I hope you have benefited and will benefit from these interpretations of ours.
And to recognize that when we shape our lives around this deep desire we have to bring peace and love into the world, communion into our societies, to have faith that this incredible power that resides in the universe, that flows through us to help heal and to move things back into a state of balance and harmony, this is possible. We simply have to be part of the healing mechanism of the universe rather than the destructive quality of a society. And if I may speak for myself, the teachings here of Gandhi and the help of Master Michael Nagler and his always helpful and wonderful instructing assistant, Stephanie Van Hook, I am incredibly grateful to have gone through this series. Thank you for following through with me. If you did the entire series with me, that's amazing. This last 21 hours or so of exploration with them have been a lot of fun, certainly, very transformative, very eye-opening. I feel like I have gained a huge amount of awareness of some of the possibilities of these traditions, and certainly changed my mind about a number of them. When I listened to the very first series that I went through with Melanie taking part, we had much less of a sense of the expansive possibilities and the attention that Gandhi paid toward certain specific subjects, whether it was economics and democracy or his devotion to his own spiritual practice. My eyes have been open and my heart has been filled, and I am very excited to continue this journey of ahimsa, this journey from the inside out into helping our communities heal and grow together. And again, because this is a communal effort, please do write something down in the comment section about what you've learned, what you think that we should do next, books and videos that you'd recommend, so we can continue to grow together as a community to make our world more peaceful and more filled with love and the light that we look forward to in our daily lives. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Michael.